So the Navajo got their land after the Alcatraz occupation?
They got their termination policies removed. See, they didn't. They had,
But I thought reservations existed since the 1800s.
yeah, but they did. But they took their when termination came, they took that away from them.
Oh, they took the reservations away as
That,
also?
that was the status. Termination policies were to get the land. See, it's for the resources. It's all about money and resources.
I see.
It's always been resources. You see, when they stuck the people on the reservations, they stuck them out there and go to a reservation, and they look like they're dull. They look like there's nothing there. It turns out all the minerals were there. Everything that they wanted in their hands. Now they want it back.
So for several years, the Native Americans actually didn't have reservations because they took them away with the termination?
They had rancherias.
They had rancherias.
The reservations came from the government, federal government.
Yes.
Before that, they had rancherias, had their own they had their own areas, but they had their own tribes. Okay. They weren't called reservations. Now they call them reservations.
Okay.
Back then, they were just a tribal land. So the reservation system started after the.
But then why did the Navajo get 90 million acres and other tribes got almost nothing?
Because that was their land. That was Navajo land. They're the biggest tribe in the country.
But there are other tribes in the country.
Yeah, but not in that area.
No, I mean in other areas across the
most of them got their land back. Most of them did. The only ones I don't know if the Miletma has got their recognition.
What about in California though? A lot of people did not get their land back.
Didn't get their recognition. Yeah. Ohlone didn't get their recognition because of 3 or 4 tribes that are always bickering.
I see.
And they bickered and they lost their opportunity. Now, see, like Karina's group, they're not federally recognized as a tribe. So their funding comes from a different source. They're not federal government funded. They're public.
If you're recognized by the federal government, you get funding as well.
Yeah, it's part of the it's part of the Interior Secretary part of it. You get, but that was back. See, they started that back when they started the reservation system, and the reservation systems didn't work because you couldn't. Everybody was hunter-gatherers. They didn't stay there. They moved from camp to camp to camp to camp to camp. They followed the buffalo. They followed the crop. They followed whatever. So most of the tribes were nomadic, but they returned to their tribal lands. Yearly, some people, the elders, stayed there.
Yeah.
The younger people brought food back for them and stuff. The Hogans and all the stuff. Teepees, Hogans, and Longhouses were all there. New York, which is a tribe Richard Oakes was from, they never lost their recognition because they were kind of like hooked up with Canada, and Canada still has a lot of places that still got recognition. They never took the record because they didn't agree with the United States part of it. But still, they treated Indians really bad in Canada too.
They did, yeah.
So that it was, But,
so apart from starting the fire and being the holder of the fire in the Alcatraz ceremonies, are you involved in other ways with the Native American movements?
Well, I am. I'm still involved with Alcatraz.
Yeah.
Since '96, we started talking to them, and I don't know.
Talking to
whom?
whom?
You have to the federal government.
Okay.
The National Park Service, actually.
Yeah.
If you haven't been on Alcatraz, you probably haven't seen the signs. There's a bunch of signs out there on the island that were put there during the occupation. This is Indian land. Welcome to Indian land. The water tower's painted, and you could probably look it up on Google. You could probably look my name up and you see that I painted most of them.
Okay.
I put all the slogans because I told them, they told me that they when I told them first started talking, I told them, how about putting all those signatures back up there? And they said, oh, you're talking about something that's going to be really hard to do, Eloy. And I says, why? And they says, there's a lot of logistics there and all that. They give me a whole bunch of runaround. So I call it poking the bear. I just, every once in a while, I go back there and poke him and tell him. Finally, I got one guy that was kind of a little bit, he was there and he told me, that would be a great idea, man. He said, let me think about it. So he was an intern when I first started talking to him, so he couldn't do nothing. But he got up there where he was now a boss. And he told me, let me see if we can sneak one of those in. I said, all right. So they had just rehabbed what they call the Carpenter's building right there. It used to be the paymaster's, quartermaster pay place anyway. They had a sign on the side that said Indian land. It had two tomahawks crossed like this, and a teepee and some other, and this is Indian land right on there. But you can't see it as you walk in, but you only see it when the boats go around, and you can't see it this way. Only when the boat comes around from the other side can you see it. So it wasn't as visible, So that's why I said we kind of like snuck it in. So anyway, they told me they had a. I asked when they were going to do the painting, and they said, "Well, we got these contractors going to do the painting." And I said, "You got what?" They said, "We got these contractors." And I said, "You got any Indian people?" He says, "No." And I said, "Bullshit! You're not going to do that." That's why I put it to him just like that. I said, "Because your policy says that this is our stuff. We were the last ones on the island. You got to preserve our stuff." And what had happened, our stuff got all whitewashed. All those signs that we had put up in 1969, there was no trace of Indian activity. All they'd say was the Indians burned the warden's house. That's what they point out there when we got out there. So anyway, we did that. They said, after I told them, "You can't do that, that's our stuff." They said, "Well," in that day the paint was kind of tacky and they couldn't do nothing about it. So I told them, "I'll get some Indians." And so we said, "Okay, tomorrow you bring some." So I put out the word, and 17 people said they was coming out. 6 people showed up. The 6 people did that. We were able to put it back. We put it back. But this time we put our handprints in red right on the wall. So all our fingerprints, all our DNA is right there on that wall. And then the next piece that we did was a big red fist. It's down on the bottom. All these you can't really see them, not really visible. So this is about the 2011. That was the one that was when you come right in. There's a little shed. We put red power on that one, and then the biggest one, the one that got all the attention, was the water tower. So when we did the water tower, we did that in 2011, and there was only 4 of us that painted that. It was me and Richard Oakes' daughter, his grandson, and his nephew. Right up there on that top, put the Indian land back on the top. Went up there, and that got all the attention. That got the New York Times out there. They took photos. The New York Times did an article. There's an article they did on me in the Times in there somewhere. Can't even remember the guy's name. But I know I can't get my own photos. They took photos, and I got to pay money to get my own picture back. I said, "Nah, I do that. I'll take another picture." But anyway, so all that started happening, but the water towers got the biggest amount of attention because up to that point nobody knew what we were doing, and at that point the national park put it out, and they put it out like Indians are going to paint the graffiti, and when they said the graffiti, I thought, wait. I told them, "That's not a graffiti. That's not graffiti." I said, "What do you mean it's not graffiti? Those are political statements." I told them, "That's not graffiti. There's a difference." So now they call it political statements. They don't call it graffiti. So that was one of the little changes, but it was a big change. So anyway, after that, more people got involved, and then I started talking about, at that point, in 2008, I'd been out there talking to one of the rangers, and he told me, he says, "I seen a bunch of guys coming off backpacks and stuff," and I said, "What's all that?" He says, "Oh, that's the Sea Scouts." And I said, "Sea Scouts?" I said, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, they're part of the Boy Scout kind of group, kind of like, I said, "Yeah?" I said, "What are they doing here?" He said, "Oh, they do overnights over here." I said, You let people do overnights on the island?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, what about Indian kids?" He says, "Nobody's ever asked." And I said, "I'm asking." Right there, So he told me, "Well," he said, "you get one of the rangers to sponsor you." So I went to a couple of rangers that I thought were pretty cool. And he said, No, I can't do it. I can't do it, man. Put kind of like a mark on me or something." So I went to this little ranger, and her name was Eloy Bronson. She had real thick glasses on, so I barely could see. But I was in their quarters one day, and they had a giant kind of a little board up there where you wrote all the message things that you do in the day. And I was sitting on the table, right, and I was watching her, and she got this piece of paper, and she rolled it up like this. I watched her, and she put this. And then she goes, and shot this dart right over my head, and I looked at her, and I said, "Whoa!" And she said, "You're lucky it didn't have poison in it." And I said, "Well," so she gave me that whole history about the Indians and Tarahumara and stuff. That was their thing. And I said, "Lori," I said, "I want to ask you a question. Do you think you could sponsor our overnight group?" And she says, "Yeah, I can do that for you." And so she's the one that stuck up for us, the main one. So I told her, "Let's see what we can do." So anyway, she said, "Well, first we got to get you on the letterhead." So we wrote a couple letterheads, and event coordinator. That was me, and she was the event sponsor on the bottom. And we were the only two that was working on it. And then I got Richard Oakes' family involved because I wanted, that was the main purpose. Because when I finished IFH, I had done it because I wanted to do that. I did the first Richard Oakes Memorial in the whole Bay Area for him right there at Intertribal Friendship Hub. That was the first one we did. Everything was brand new. I mean, it was a great event. Great event. Had a whole lot of people there, a lot of kids. It was great. It was a great event. Lasted 2 days. It was pretty cool. But, so when we got over there after the painting, we were up on the top painting the water tower, and when Lori, anyway, we started the overnight trips, and we started taking kids out overnight, and they got to sleep in the cells like the prisoners did, you know. They got to, where we slept, they got to do everything that we did at nighttime, because Lori was there and she had access, and she had the keys, and it was cool. We had barbecues out there, and, you know, Bear was a cook out there a couple of times. Got him out there the first time I got I think probably one of the first times.
When did this start?
Yeah.
When did it start?
2008.
So does it happen every year then? Or how often does it happen?
They quit the overnights about 2 years ago because of the lead paint issue.
Oh.
But I don't think that was that. I think it was somebody messed up. Some other group messed it up.
Oh.
And that's what I heard from somebody else. But eventually I'll get it back, I think.
And you started a canoe something?
Yeah,
also?
the canoe journey that Julian started. See, for the 50, that was for...
Oh, Julian, Brave Noise Cat started it.
No.
No.
Me and his dad started it.
You and his father started it.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
See, so anyway, when I had gone to the fishing rights, and I had met a lot of the people up there in fishing rights in the early 70s.
In Washington
In
State.
Washington, I met all of the, you know, like the Squally, Poyala, Michael Shuswap, all the tribes up north that were fishing tribes, and all the people that were involved. I met all those, Frank Brown and Hank Adams and Lloyd, you know, Janet McLeod, Roberta. Oh man, there was just a whole bunch of people that were involved. I can't remember all the names now, but all those. Mickey Gemmell was Pitt River. We went to Pitt River. All of us went to different. All the groups got together and supported all the other groups, you know. And that's when all the other stuff started. That's when all the other stuff started. When we started getting all the rights back, the Indian rights and all that, and, you know. And that was pretty much. That's all attributed to the occupation of Alcatraz. All that came back because of that. Even the tribes, the casinos, and all that other stuff. All that came back because of Alcatraz, and they were able to get recognition. A lot of them didn't have federal recognition. That's why they couldn't start casinos. You know, the one right there, Cache Creek, and they had Cache Creek. I think had 13 members when they started their little group. You know, the other group over here in Santa Rosa, we went out with them. They came to IFH and asked us to go out there with them to help get their casinos. We went out there when they had signs on the road in Santa Rosa: cows, not casinos; milk, not casinos, and all that. You know, and now they got one of the biggest casinos, and they're buying land. They're paying for half the interface and the structure of all the roads and streets all around Santa Rosa. That's coming out of that Indian casino. They're paying for fire departments, health centers, hospitals. That's all coming out of casino money. You don't hear that, you know. And all those towns that got casinos, they're pretty healthy. They're pretty well off, you know.
So tell us again about the canoe and with your Julian's father.
So when we went up there and met them, so when we were planning this was after we did we started doing the painting, we started doing that, and then we had the first Indians of all tribes Indian Day in 2013. That's the first time they ever let us have our own day.
Where?
On Alcatraz.
Okay.
And up to then we had since we had been on the island, we hadn't gathered as a group. Mm. But then we got pretty much almost all the people that were still alive came out, and we actually got.
From the original occupation.
Yeah, and we actually got the park to pay for a lot of
Very
tickets,
nice.
you know, because they wanted to make it happen, and so at that point, then we started planning. We did the water tower, and the water tower actually made it into the International Indian Treaty Festival. It's that movie. They made a movie of us painting that tower, and we put it back up, and it made it to the Indian Festival. And that's when they had Wilma Mankiller was the chief of the Cherokees. She was on Alcatraz. She became the chief of Cherokee after she left Alcatraz. Refurbished their whole tribe, made their tribe come back. So there was a lot of people that were, that did that. Johnny Bear Cub's in Montana right now in Browning. She's got probably one of the loudest, biggest buffalo herds, that original buffalo that was still roamed the prairie on her spot. And she brought the buffalo back. So all those places are bringing all that stuff back to, the way that it was, the harvesting, the plants, native plants, all that, everything. It just made a comeback, and Alcatraz was a primary source of that. It's not that Alcatraz did everything, because the Indians always, there's a lot of them that stayed there and did it, and they died for it, a lot of them too, for doing it. See, so when Richard and